Welcome to Lost Girl Therapy. If you are somebody who is in mental health counseling program and you are wondering if you were able to do this work, let's talk about it. This is part one. So part one is going to focus on what it feels like to move into the mental health counseling profession, especially if you have not had a career before that. So if you are somebody who went back to school immediately after undergrad, if you did a 5-year program, you might know the sensation that I'm talking about. It's this feeling of like, I don't know if I can do this work. And if you're coming off the heels of doing a practicum or an internship where you are being underpaid or not paid at all, you're working absurd hours, the client cases are really hard, you're just feeling completely overwhelmed, it is natural for you to begin to feel like perhaps this environment is not the right one for you. One of the things that a lot of graduate programs do not talk about is the fact that your practicum experience or your internship experience does not need to be the way that your career goes. Your career can actually be a completely different trajectory. Yes, internships and practicums are very important in allowing you to gain insight and hopefully clinical skill sets into the roles that you're seeking in the future, but that doesn't always happen. It's not often that we see kids come out of these mental health counseling or social work programs and say that their internship taught them clinical skills. And that's for a variety of reasons. Your supervisors can be overwhelmed. There might not be an effective way for interns or practicum students to work with clients because you're just not trained enough yet to do that type of work, and yet you still have to get your hours. So there's a lot of disconnect. What begins to happen is, especially if you're on the younger side and you have not had a career, you can start questioning your ability to do this work at all. And we don't often talk about how the wrong environment can make you feel like you can't do this. The wrong environment is anything that has you negate your own needs for the betterment of everybody else, whether that is your clients, your supervisor, your schoolmates, anything of that sort. And if you're somebody who's coming out of undergrad and then going into a 5-year program, you might notice that you know the experience of what it feels like to hit the academic marks, but when it comes to a professional setting, there aren't really any rules. There's a lot of flexibility. There's also a lot of unknowns because in my experience, I never heard a supervisor sit someone down and say, this is what I expect from you. These are the marks you have to make. This is exactly how I need you to show up in the job. A lot of the discussion around how you show up in a clinical role is both practitioner preference, so the way that you do therapy, or very, very, very stringent rules that, like if you were doing a CBT internship where you can only ask these questions and this is how you work with a client for a half-hour period, it doesn't allow you to shape the clinical skill set that promotes you creating a sense of an independent practitioner profile. That was a mouthful. In either scenario, whether it is highly strict or just incredibly flexible, if you're coming out of an academic setting, reading those signals is just very challenging, and often it feels overwhelming because we don't know where to go or who to be. And remember, in an academic setting, the only thing that you've ever needed to be is a student. You know how to be a student, especially if you've already gone through undergrad and high school and now a graduate program. You know what it means to show up to fulfill what is expected of you. You don't have a paradigm for what it means to show up as an employee or as a therapist. And I think what's interesting about the role of being a therapist as somebody who went back to school at 28, not at 22, is that because I had a professional career, I was really able to look at this and say, I'm a separate person from who I am in session. Who I show up as professionally is completely different from who I am in my day-to-day life, and my self-worth is not tied to that. It is so easy to fall into the trap of self-worth, especially because academic programs start promoting that social work programs or mental health programs, any students in there are people who do it because we are passionate about the work and because we want to give ourselves to others in a helping profession. And while yes, that is true on a lot of levels, the other side of that equation is the very sometimes quiet message that academic programs promote that says, hey, don't give too much of yourself. Don't pour from an empty cup. Make sure you're taking care of yourself. It's so important. But that becomes the afterthought. We promote the fact that this is a helping profession that we should all be passionate about, but then we don't take time to consider what it really means to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves first and foremost. Go to part 2 because I'm going to talk about what it looks like when we stop taking care of ourselves and how that can breed insecurity in the profession.